Hi there! It is tomato and pepper planting day. It is actually Mother's Day 2025, so we are a week or so into May and the weather looks good. We don't look like we're going to have any more surprise frosts, at least in the next 2 weeks. So it's time to get these puppies in the ground. Let me show you how they look now in their pots. So these are my tomato plants. As you can see, some of them are significantly bigger than others. Some of them look a little sad. We'll see how this goes. Hopefully they will perk up once they are planted. This year, my tomato plants are much smaller overall as a group than my ones last year. Last year, my tomato plants at this time of the year were also in these same size pots, but they were probably at least twice as tall. So kind of actually leggy. I actually liked that though, because what that allowed was for me to plant them really super deep, because if you can see all these little hairs along the stem of the tomato plant, those will grow and become roots if you plant that into the ground. So what typically is a good idea to do is you trim off the lower leaves of a tomato plant, plant it very deep with the soil level coming up to probably about here, and then that means you get a much more significant sturdy root system, because this tomato plant will end up growing to be probably 6+ feet tall. And so you really want a good strong root system to help support that plant, considering how large it is going to get. Now I will be putting a steel vinyl coated type of rod planted into the ground next to where I'm planting these for each one. That will serve as a support, at least for the first couple of months or so, hopefully. I may, with some of the tomato plants that are planted along the outer edge or the end of the enclosed bed, I will also probably utilize this wire fencing mesh to help support them. I'll just tie them, a couple of the branches to that, to in a way almost let them trellis onto the fencing, and that will also help provide some support. Last year I also strung a wire for the tomatoes that were in one of these beds from the end here to the trellis that is made from a cattle panel, and then tied the tops of the tomato plants. Yes, my tomato plants made it from here all the way up to here, and so I just used that to kind of tie with the green. You can see a few remnants still there on the end of the garden wall, to help tie up the top of the tomato plant with that wire, just to keep them from falling over on top of each other. So we'll see, as they grow, they will get more support as needed. And then these are some of my pepper plants. You can see they're a little bit bigger. Here's the rest of the pepper plants. These guys actually I started a little earlier than I should have, and so some of them were kind of stressed. They were in pots that were this size, that were not big enough for what they really needed. It took me a while, but just because of life and work, to get them moved up to these bigger pots. I made a video about that. And they were fruiting, they were blooming. You can see they've started blooming, getting ready to put on some buds again. Some of these I may just let them go ahead at this point and make those blooms, unless they're really small and spindly looking, in which case I may still cut off some of those blooms. But the peppers have been ready to be planted size-wise for a while, but the weather was not quite yet what they need. Peppers need even a little bit more heat and consistent temperatures, being above the 40s into at least the 50s at night, even more than tomatoes do. So it's just working out that everybody's going to get planted at the same time. Normally I would put my tomatoes out a little bit earlier, but we just didn't have the weather to support that. So let me get set up and then I'll show you how we plant them. All right, I'm getting ready to put one of the tomatoes into the ground, and so I thought I would show you the basic steps. Essentially, you want to loosen up where you're planting. I just use this small little trowel and kind of go in and out a few times like this just to make sure everything's nice and loose. And then I pull it back and create the hole. And the hole depth is going to be based on your actual tomato. So this is one of the ones that's kind of middle of the road between looking a little paltry and small and wispy, but is a little bit taller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim off this leaf stem and this one, and then I'm going to bury it up to about where this one is right here, where my finger is. And then all these little hairs will eventually become roots, and that's going to give this a much stronger system. There's still plenty of leaves here at the top. I may even take off this one right here, because you don't really want to end up with any of your leaves touching the soil. That is a way that different diseases can make their way onto your tomato plant. So that's one of the reasons also, once they start growing and putting on some height, you want to trim off up about 6 inches from the soil level so that things don't splash up from the soil and cause your plant to have any diseases. So essentially, let's get to this. I'm gonna just snip them off. If you don't have fingernails that can snap it off like that, use a pair of garden snips. Snip. And then I'm going to check my hole. That looks pretty good. It can maybe be a little bit deeper. Loose soil is good until it keeps going back in and filling your hole. All right, so then now I'm going to put 2 things in the bottom of the hole. One of them is Espoma Biotone starter fertilizer, Biotone Plus. I'm going to just put a handful, kind of like that, right there in the bottom of the hole. I'm also going to put a good healthy handful of bone meal that has a good amount of calcium to help prevent, hopefully, blossom end rot. And then the other key with the blossom end rot is making sure you are keeping your watering consistent so that the plant's able to take up the calcium that is in the soil. So now I'm going to just take our little guy out of its pot. It's fairly loose in here because I just up potted these a couple weeks ago. So basically what I'm going to do is put my hand like this to protect the little baby plant, turn it upside down. It should just kind of pop out. Hold on a second, camera angle is going to be bad. Pull that pot off. You can see we do have some good roots going down into the bottom of that, where that pot was. Dump it upside down in the hole, and then hold it while you fill, and make sure that you have it up high enough that you don't have leaves hitting soil level, so that you end up kind of like this. So let me get this finished planting and I'll show you where it ended up. All right, so there she is planted. You can see that one stem that's real close to the ground. I will probably snip that one off as well. In fact, let's just do that so I don't forget. There we go. And then make sure she's tucked in nice. And then the other thing that I am doing, at least for right now, is I'm kind of making a little berm around where the tomato is planted. That way when we water, the water won't run off. You don't want to plant it on too much of a hill at first. Let it get water, but you also don't want it to be like in the bottom of a well where it would be sitting in standing water. So just a little bit there to help water from running off too quickly. And that's it. That's planting our tomatoes. I'll be doing my peppers exactly the same way. So thanks for joining me here in Aunt Susan's garden as we get our tomatoes and peppers planted. Happy planting.